Major Douglas Kelley. He is the Army psychiatrist tasked with discovering whether these men are fit for trial.
Goring was asked what he thought about this crime of extermination.
Douglas Kelley walked into Nuremberg expecting a monster. What he found inside Hermann Göring was worse. In a cramped prison room smelling of sweat and defeat, Kelley ran the Rorschach tests, memory drills, and moral reasoning trials that would decide whether the Reich's most powerful survivor was insane or fully responsible. Goring manipulated and calculated every answer. Yet, the evaluation did something shocking. It revealed that Goring was not insane. He was aware of every atrocity he committed. The doctor and the devil. When the war finally ended, the world expected closure. Instead, a new problem surfaced. The architects of the Nazi regime were alive and in Allied custody. These were not broken men pulled from rubble. They were conscious, composed, and fully aware that judgment was coming. But before justice could move forward, someone had to establish whether these men were sane enough to stand before the world and answer for their crimes. For that task, the United States Army turned to a young psychiatrist named Captain Douglas McGlashan Kelley. He was ordered to observe the captured Nazi leadership, evaluate their mental condition, and make sure they remained stable as they waited for trial at Nuremberg. The responsibility carried enormous weight. If one of these men collapsed mentally, the entire process could be thrown into doubt.
That's me! Hold him! Come on! Don't try me as a common criminal!
Before the war ended, Kelley had already built a solid reputation in civilian life. He served as director of the San Francisco County Psychopathic Hospital, a role which placed him among the rising figures in American psychiatry. When he joined the Army, he was sent overseas and eventually became chief psychiatrist for the 30th General Hospital in the European theater. Thousands of American soldiers passed through his care. Battle shock, exhaustion, fear, and grief were familiar territory. War criminals were not. The order caught him off guard. Kelley openly admitted he had no background dealing with men accused of orchestrating mass murder. Still, once the shock wore off, something else took its place: curiosity. The assignment offered more than routine evaluations. It offered access to people the world wanted to label as monsters. Kelley began to wonder whether they were truly different from everyone else. He wanted to know if these men were biological anomalies or if the capacity for such horror resided in everyone.
So now you would come to Hermann Göring to discredit my old friend.
In August 1945, the same month he turned 33, Kelley arrived in Mondorf-les-Bains, a small spa town in Luxembourg. The setting was deceptive. Behind the walls of a converted hotel nicknamed Camp Ashcan, the Americans had established a high-security interrogation center. The guest list included the most hated men on Earth. Among them sat Admiral Karl Dönitz. He was the naval commander who briefly led Germany after Adolf Hitler took his own life, and the most prominent prisoner of all, Hermann Göring. Goring was the ultimate prize for a researcher like Kelley. With the Führer dead, he stood as the highest-ranking Nazi in captivity. This was the man who signed the order that cleared the way for the mass killing of Europe's Jews, knowing exactly what would happen to millions of families. He created the Gestapo, a secret police force that dragged people from their homes in the middle of the night and sent them to prisons where torture was routine. He directed the theft of Jewish property on a scale the world had never seen, and he personally took paintings, jewelry, children's keepsakes from homes whose owners were already being shipped to their deaths. Under his economic programs, prisoners in camps were forced to carry stones until their bodies snapped, and when they collapsed, the guards were ordered to beat them until they stopped moving. He approved brutal reprisals, where entire villages were burned to the ground because one German soldier had been attacked, and innocent men, women, and children were lined up and shot in the streets to send a message. This was the man Hitler had once chosen to inherit the Nazi Empire. Although Kelley spoke no German and had to rely on translators, his intellectual hunger drove him to spend hundreds of hours inside those cramped cells. As soon as the interviews began, Kelley knew he would be talking to a monster. But he found a man who possessed a terrifying level of charisma. Every morning when the doctor began his rounds, Goring would leap from his chair with a wide smile. He would extend a hand in greeting and motion toward his cot. The Reich marshal acted more like a gracious host than a prisoner of war, insisting that Kelley sit beside him. Even in captivity, Goring was eloquent and imaginative, using his intellect to bridge the gap created by the language barrier. He was a master of performance, and Kelley was his captive audience. However, before Kelley could begin his true psychological mapping, he had to solve a serious medical problem.
Ich habe nie jemanden getötet! It's okay, don't touch him.
When Goring was captured, he was heavily addicted to paracodeine, a strong pain relief narcotic he had been taking since dental surgery in the 1930s.
I'm here, look at me. I'm here, I'm not gonna let you die, all right? In.
By the time he reached Allied custody, he was swallowing huge doses every day. The drug kept him calm, but it also clouded his thinking, slowed his reactions, and made his emotions appear flat. If Goring stayed on the pills, every psychological test would be worthless because Kelley would be measuring the effect of the drug, not the man himself. This meant one thing: Goring had to stop taking the medication completely. Kelley knew that forcing withdrawal on a man with Goring's pride would only cause resistance, so he used psychology instead. He praised Goring's strength and reminded him of his reputation as a powerful leader. Kelley then suggested that only weak men needed medication to endure withdrawal. The tactic worked instantly. Determined to prove he was superior to everyone around him, Goring threw the pills away and began withdrawal on the spot. With the drug fog lifted, the real work began. The test that exposed Goring. As the trials loomed, Kelley turned to a tool which he believed would cut through the layers of deception and reveal the true essence of the men who had burned Europe to the ground. This tool was the Rorschach test. Developed by a Swiss psychiatrist named Hermann Rorschach following World War I, the test consisted of 10 abstract inkblot images. To a layman, they looked like random spills on paper. To Kelley, they were windows. He was an expert in this method, weighing how a subject viewed the images. Did they focus on the entire picture or obsess over tiny, jagged details? Did their stories follow a logical path or descend into chaos? When the cards were finally placed in front of him, Goring did not recoil or hesitate. Instead, he erupted with a theatrical energy that felt entirely out of place in a prison cell. He laughed. He snapped his fingers. He even joked that the Luftwaffe should have used these ink blots to pick out their best pilots. To Goring, this was not a medical evaluation. It was a performance. On card 2, the image shows two large black shapes facing each other with bright red blotches in the center. Many people immediately say the red looks like blood or an open wound. Some describe two people standing still, holding something, or examining an injury. But Goring did not see anything like that. He leaned forward, smiled, and called it a fantastic dance. He said the shapes looked like two important men spinning around each other to show off their rank. He talked about their hats, their uniforms, and who stood higher in status. He refused to acknowledge the red stains at all. On card 3, the image again shows black shapes with red spots in the center. Many people say the red looks like blood or organs. Goring refused to see anything like that. At first, he joked that the shapes looked like two cartoon men in high collars arguing with each other. Then his attitude changed. His smile vanished, and he leaned over the card with irritation. He jabbed at the red areas with his fingernail, pressing hard, as if he was trying to dig them out of the paper. His voice dropped and he said, "These red spots, I can't make sense of them." The more he stared at them, the angrier he became, as though the color itself offended him and had no right to be there.
Nahmen das größte Interesse und die Hauptarbeit des Führers in Anspruch.
Kelley watched this gesture closely. It was a small physical tick of denial. Just as Goring had used drugs and orders to distance himself from the blood on his hands during the war, he was now trying to wave away the stains on the paper. He wouldn't call the red ink blood. He wouldn't acknowledge the violence it implied. Kelley tested him and asked plainly, "Does the red look like blood to you?" Goring didn't flinch. Instead, he gave a small smile and said, "Doctor, the mind sees what it chooses to see." He avoided the question entirely, turning it back on Kelley as if he were the one being analyzed. His tone made it clear he would not admit to anything that suggested harm or guilt. He tried to control the moment the same way he had tried to control people during the war. Throughout the entire process, Goring's mind showed no signs of breaking. There was no chaos. There was no confusion. Instead, there was a sharp, aggressive intelligence that always circled back to himself. As the test went on, Kelley began to figure out the kind of man Goring truly was, and soon he would share his shocking conclusion with the world. But before that, he needed to proceed to the next stage that would reveal more horrifying details about Goring's personality.
Until his counsel puts it to him in re-examination.
Genius without conscience. Next, Kelley administered a series of intelligence tests. The results were striking. Goring scored an IQ of 138, placing him among the most intelligent men in the prison. Hearing this delighted him. He treated the number as proof that he was naturally superior to everyone around him, including the other defendants. This test result helped Kelley understand another part of Goring's personality, his obsession with how he appeared to others. Goring talked constantly about his body, his clothing, and the image he projected. Kelley took advantage of this. He told Goring that losing weight would make him look stronger and more impressive when he faced the world in court. Goring accepted this immediately and began eating less. He did not care about his health. He cared about the picture he would present to the cameras. Once Kelley understood this vanity, he saw the deeper contradiction inside the man. Goring could speak gently about protecting wildlife as the Reich's forestry and hunting master, yet he could also order the bombing of a city without hesitation. In 1940, he ordered the attack on Rotterdam that destroyed its center and left tens of thousands of people without homes. Kelley struggled to understand how both sides could exist in the same person. The darkest moment came when Kelley questioned him about a close associate whom Goring had ordered to be killed. Goring paused, stared at Kelley in confusion, and asked why the question mattered. Then he shrugged and said the man was in my way. There was no anger in his voice, no emotion at all. It was a simple statement of fact. For Goring, removing a human being was no different from removing an obstacle. In his private notes, Kelley wrote that Goring was the most ruthless human being he had ever met. Yet, as the sessions continued, something even more unsettling began to appear inside the cell.
In order to find out, first we have to understand a little bit about what are narcotics.
A secret bond in the cell. Even behind the thick stone walls of the Palace of Justice, Hermann Göring did not act like a man waiting to die. He acted as if he still ran the room. The other defendants watched him, copied him, and waited for his reactions before giving their own. What shocked Kelley was how natural that authority felt. Instead of pushing the psychiatrist away, Goring drew him closer. Critics later argued that Goring knew exactly how to do this, that he used charm, confidence, and small emotional rewards to pull Kelley into his orbit. Whether Kelley realized it or not, the conversations began to change. Scheduled evaluations turned into long personal talks.
You may say, well, a doctor might cheat, but he probably been in any of the other tremendous number of dangerous drugs he used.
Clinical questions turned into private discussions that lasted hours. Kelley sat with him on the edge of a prison bunk while Goring explained exactly how he rose to power. He openly admitted that he broke the Treaty of Versailles, the agreement that forbade Germany from rebuilding its air force, expanding its army, or producing major weapons after World War I.
The most determined line of soldiers cannot oppose a machine gun that fires hundreds of rounds a minute.
He said he ignored every rule because he wanted Germany to become a dominant world power again, and he believed the country had the right to expand by force. He also said the only real mistake he made was not pushing even harder before the war began. All he wanted was for Germany to stay ahead of everyone. In quieter moments, Goring dropped the Patriotic Act. He told Kelley openly that his real goal had never been Germany. It had been himself. He wanted supreme command of the Third Reich. Kelley asked why he never opposed Hitler, even when the war was collapsing. Goring gave a cold answer. Find me one man who said no to the Führer and is not 6 feet underground. Goring believed he was the last voice of a fallen government, and that history would judge him more gently if he shaped the story first. He told Kelley he knew he would hang, and that Kelley knew it too. But he said he intended to leave behind a legacy that made him look like a strong and loyal leader. If the judges would not believe him, then the German people would. He talked about books written in his honor and statues raised long after his execution. Kelley listened, and slowly, something dangerous began to happen. He started to feel respect. It was not respect for Göring's crimes. It was respect for his certainty, his control, and his fierce devotion to his wife and daughter. Kelley found himself reacting to Göring not as a monster, but as a man who showed emotion and loyalty in ways Kelley did not expect. This shift terrified him, though he could not yet admit it. At the same time, he was betraying every rule of medical ethics. He wrote regular secret memos to General William Donovan of the OSS, reporting everything Göring said, including his legal strategy.
As Reich Marshal of Germany.
You are not Reichsmarshal here. You are only Hermann Göring, the prisoner.
He wrote that Göring planned to call a British lord to claim he once supported peaceful negotiations. He reported Göring's admission that he personally drove the 4-year plan that rebuilt Germany for war. Yet despite acting as informant, Kelley also argued for small comforts for the prisoners. He asked Donovan to provide cushions for the courtroom benches because the defendants were old and in failing health. He was acting like their doctor, their messenger, and their protector, all at once. Kelley had tied himself into a knot that grew tighter every day. He was supposed to study Göring. Instead, Göring was studying him, and as the trial approached, the relationship crossed into even more personal territory. Breaking the doctor's code. As the cold air of November 1945 settled over the Nuremberg prison, Douglas had become trapped in a complex web of conflicting identities, struggling to figure out if he was Göring's doctor, a friendly companion, a scientific researcher, or a military informant. This confusion of loyalty was not just a mental burden.
Can you open your shirt, please?
Könnten Sie bitte Ihr Hemd aufknöpfen?
It began to manifest in the very real favors he was performing for the highest-ranking Nazi in custody. Hermann Göring was a master at identifying human weakness, and he soon realized that Kelley could be more than just a man with a notepad. He began to view the psychiatrist as a well-connected fixer who could solve the personal problems the war had left in its wake. Göring claimed that during his initial arrest, Allied officials had promised that his wife, Emmy, and his daughter, Etta, would be looked after. By November 1945, however, the family was fractured. Emmy was being held in a civilian internee camp near Regensburg, while young Etta was living miles away in a nursery school in the city of Neuhaus. The prisoner, desperate to reunite his family and send them letters, turned to Kelley for help. In a move that shocked many of his peers, Kelley agreed to intervene. He went to General William Donovan on Göring's behalf and even took it upon himself to personally deliver handwritten letters to the prisoner's wife. One specific note, which Kelley kept in his private files, showed just how deep the bond had grown. Göring wrote to his wife saying, "Today I can send you a letter directly. Major Kelley, the doctor who is treating me and who has my fullest confidence, is bringing it to you. You can also talk to him freely." Kelley's intervention actually worked. He successfully